I don't know if you guys heard, but President Obama was playing golf the other day, and as he was walking off the course, he was accosted by an armed robber. And the armed robber said, "Give me all your money." President Obama looked at the guy and said, "Don't you know who I am?" And the robber said, "No." And he said, "Well, I'm President of the United States." The robber looked at him and said, "Oh, okay. Give me back all my money." When I talked about making friendships, the next speaker we have coming up is definitely in that category. His name is Les Naiman. Les is a caterer by trade, but he's also a radio talk show host. He's known as the Voice of Liberty on WGTK 970 in Louisville. And Les will tell you that you know, one night, I guess it's probably 2 or 3 years ago, he got so mad at the television. They were talking about things that were going on politically, and he got so mad. I don't know, Les, you threw something to the television or something, and your wife said, "Well, daggone it, why don't you do something about it, Les?" So Les started a radio talk show, and I'll say one thing about Les. He's relentless. I don't think I know a guy that's more involved. I don't know how you have time for your catering business, Les, but more involved in getting out the conservative message as to what we need to do in the country. And I think this is Les's 3rd appearance or 4th appearance here in Madison. And wherever you are, Les, come on up. There you are. The only thing I'll say about Les is hide the children. I'll give you Les Naiman.
Thank you, Rick. I love coming to Madison. I thank you for having me here again this year. And I'm looking forward to the summertime when it's a little warmer. I've been freezing over there, but now I'll get my adrenaline going, which doesn't take very long. I spoke yesterday at the Louisville Tea Party, and as you noticed, I saw your newspaper this morning, and they didn't have any mention of this event. And the Courier-Journal, same thing. No mention of an event that in September 2009 drew over 4,000 people at Central Park. It was nice and sunny. We got a break in the weather. We've had over 1,500 and 2,000 people on the 15th tea parties for the last 2 years. Obviously, yesterday's event was at a different time. It was very bad weather forecast. But the Courier-Journal, in all their eminent liberal wisdom, covered the annual rat race at Spalding University. Yeah! The rat race, ladies and gentlemen. I thank them so much for their outstanding coverage. I thought they were covering Washington, D.C. and Frankfort, Kentucky. Because that's where the real rats are, ladies and gentlemen. They're hiding under their desks. They're stealing our money. They're taking our grandchildren's liberties. They're taking our children's futures. Right. And they do it because they want to, and because they know they can. That's why they do what they do. They know they can. Right. And we, the people, have not done enough. Right. You know, I've been a speaker in a number of places. I called Mandy Connell's show last week, and I was telling her what I'm going to tell you. And it's basically a lesson on how we got to where we are today. She called me draconian in her sort of tongue-in-cheek. But you know what? Right now we need some draconian measures. Right. Because there's no more time to retreat. There's no more time to surrender. The people in the House of Representatives, the Republicans, are a disgrace to this country. And so is the rest of Congress. $38 billion they promised to cut. It's $350 million, which is like a half of 1 cent out of every $20,000 or some ridiculous amount of money. Wow. Barack Obama is just part of a long-held plan to take over this country. Right. The progressives started back with Woodrow Wilson back in the 20s. Obviously, World War II. You know, Woodrow Wilson was such an expert on propaganda that Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister of Nazi Germany, stole his ideas implemented in Germany, and you saw what happened there. Millions and millions of people were killed worldwide. Almost, I guess, 40, 50, 60 million people were killed in World War II. Plus, then you had Joseph Stalin, another evil man, as evil as Hitler, killed over 40 or 50 million people. This is communism, folks.
Right.
Socialism and communism.
Right.
Adolf Hitler was a socialist. He was a fascist socialist. It had nothing to do with the right wing. The media, the Democrats have been feeding everybody that Nazis were right-wingers. They were not right-wingers, they were left-wingers.
Right.
The only difference between Nazi Germany and Joseph Stalin and Adolf Hitler was the fact is that Adolf Hitler was more of a national socialist. Socialism does two things. When it becomes communism, it leads to dead bodies, whether it be their agenda, their policies, or by the repression. Because with the agenda and policies comes chaos, and with chaos comes repression, with repression comes dead bodies.
Right.
Joseph Stalin in 1 year period in the Ukraine killed over 10 million people by starving them to death. Mao Zedong killed over 30 million people by starving them to death because of their collective centralized government. And that's where Barack Hussein Obama is leading us right now. That's where George W. Bush led us as a false prophet. It's even worse when it comes to the Republican Party. We know what Democrats have become. I used to be a Democrat. I was raised in an FDR Democratic family. God loved my parents. They thought FDR hung the moon because he gave them a job. My father got a job working for $18 a week doing WPA work. And he was glad to have it. But they didn't realize that the Depression became the Great Depression because of the agenda and the policies of FDR, who had numerous communists in his cabinet. We get to 1950, so the progressives have been trying to do this for years. And obviously, the Marxist-Lenin, Marxist-Engels Communist Manifesto is now become pretty much what they teach here in America. Back in 1985, I'm going to skip ahead to a gentleman named Yuri Bezmenov. Now, I don't want you to believe this. I want you to go to your computers later today and Google Yuri Bezmenov. I learned about Yuri Bezmenov from one of my guests, Jeff Nyquist. So Google either of these gentlemen. They're both outstanding, knowledgeable people. Obviously, Bezmenov knew very well because he was a high-ranking KGB operative, and he defected to the United States. And back in 1985, he said that there were four stages of taking over America. The Soviet Union knew that they could never take over America via nuclear weapons, because they knew that it was going to be destruction on both ends. They knew they couldn't invade us. They knew that the only way they could defeat the United States of America was corrupt its values and its morals. And with the help of the Hollywood crowd, which Joe McCarthy fought valiantly in the 50s, with the House of Un-American Activities in the House, and he was the main senator in charge of the investigation of communists in the government back in the early 50s when I was a little kid. And I remember the hearings very well. It's funny what you can remember when you're 8 or 9 years old, the impact that it made, having it on a little 12-inch Philco TV that you couldn't, with the rabbit ears and stuff. But I remember Joe McCarthy being demonized by everybody. I remember that early on. But Joe McCarthy stopped the communist scourge that we see now in our government for 50 years. But back to Yuri Bezmenov. The plot hatched by the communists were to utilize the useful idiots, they used to call them in Hollywood, and all their communist, leftist, progressive allies here in the United States. Call them useful idiots, because once they take over, those useful idiots be the first ones to be discarded. Yuri Bezmenov talked about demoralization. What is demoralization? Demoralization is a 20 to 40 year program of diminishing and changing the United States curriculum, the United States value system, the United States morals. So by implementing special interest for gay marriage, by implementing the Hollywood crowd, the elites in Hollywood, to bring about pornography, sex, major violence. If you remember back, what was the first violent movie you saw? Really, really violent. I remember it distinctly in 1968. There was two movies called Medium Cool and Easy Rider. Do you remember Easy Rider? I mean, I remember that last scene where Dennis Hopper gets shot with a shotgun, or, you know, with Jack Nicholson. And this was unheard of in movies back in those days. You know, we never saw really major violence until Easy Rider. And then a movie called Medium Cool, which was about the Chicago '68 riots in the Democratic Convention. But then you saw more and more. You saw, you know, Al Pacino movie, Dog Day Afternoon, another one. Then you started seeing lots of blood and lots more sex. And now we have sex, anything goes now. And being raised in that generation of, you know, it's your thing, do what you want to do. Anything goes. You know, love the one you're with. You know. It was, when you're in the forest, you don't see the, you know, you can't see the forest or the trees when you're in it. And when you're young, yeah, it was convenient to be, you know, liberal. And, you know, conservatives didn't do well socially. And I was never much one socially in high school, so I was certainly going to do better in college. But the point of the matter is that for over 20, for let's say the late 60s until the early 2000s, this demoralization has been taking place. When you have William Ayers, a domestic terrorist, a man who's proud. In fact, go to your computers later today and go to LarryElder.com. He just interviewed William Ayers just a couple days ago.